My dad called it the midnight paper. It was exactly what it sounded like, a strange kind of newspaper that would show up at some homes at midnight. On the dot. Every Wednesday and Friday for us, but on other nights for other houses. I loved hearing about it. We'd sit at his office late at night, late for me, that age. That's all I did. Hear about it. I never saw one. He never told me any of the stories that were supposedly printed on it. So after a while, I lost interest. Grew out of it. Until now. After the funeral, I decided to stay at my parents' for a while. See to their bills, think about what to do with the mountain of personal belongings that absolutely nobody would want. It was a Friday. Before I knew it, it was midnight. I'd stayed up in the office, poring over a pile of unpaid hospital bills, when I heard it. 3 knocks at the front door. I looked at my watch. Midnight. On the dot. Strange. I went to the front door, looked through the peephole. Nothing. No one. A series of likely scenarios ran through my mind. Maybe it was a kid playing ding-dong ditch, but then why didn't they ring the doorbell? I unlocked the front door and pulled it open slowly. There, on the worn welcome mat, was a newspaper. At least that's what it looked like to me. Slowly, tentatively, I picked it up with 2 fingers, like it was covered in something toxic. It was entirely black. Both the paper and the strings binding it into a roll. Then I made the worst mistake of my life. I took it inside. I sat at my dad's office desk with a knife from the kitchen. I used it to cut the knots on the black strings, and the newspaper unrolled itself slowly. It was thin, really only 1 page in length. There, on the only page, written in blocky white letters, were the words, "The Midnight Paper." This was the headline on the page and the story written below it. Living and dying on the ledge, urban legend or dangerous social media challenge. You may not have heard about it, but your kids have. There's a strange building on the edge of town. It's around 15 stories tall, and its rooftop holds a terrifying secret. The tenants know the story all too well. Last December, a girl, whose name this publication has chosen not to publish, attempted to take her own life by jumping off the rooftop and into the cold asphalt approximately 150 feet below. A tragic event, but unfortunately, not too uncommon. But, if you believe the word in online forums and instant messages, this was no ordinary suicide attempt. Not because of the circumstances leading up to it, but because of what happened when the girl climbed over the railing separating safe rooftop concrete and fatal plunge. As soon as the girl lifted 1 foot off the edge, something strange happened. A series of images bombarded her mind. It was her father, crying in her bedroom, surrounded by his daughter's belongings. Then it was her funeral, all her friends in suits and dresses with grief and pain racking their faces. Then it was her own body, what was left of it, twisted and broken and bloated and covered in stitches, yet still crammed into a dress. The girl put her foot back on the edge, shocked out of her fatal decision. But then, for some reason, maybe to check if the images were only part of her imagination, she lifted her foot once more. The images came back, but this time they were different. It was her wearing a graduation gown. It was her in a college dorm. It was her with a boy. He hopped back over the railing and took the stairs down. The long way down, the safe way down. She told a friend, who mockingly told another friend. That friend told a few others. You know the rest. Someone posted it online, and soon the internet ran with it. That building became a million others, in a million different towns. And for some reason, people started trying it out. They'd go out in groups to play what soon became known as the ledge game. If you stood on the edge of a rooftop, on the wrong side of the railing, and stuck 1 foot out, you could see your own future. One such group decided to try the game out, with disastrous consequences. One of the girls in the group chose to go first. She climbed over the railing, stuck 1 foot out, and soon regretted it. Her friends say she started screaming, her eyes wide and looking off into the distance, as if seeing something horrifying. Then those eyes turned to look at her group of friends. She tried to grab one of them, as if trying to pull them over the railing with her, to take them with her as she fell. There was a funeral, with crying friends and a closed casket. much like the first girl saw. Instead of dissuading other teens from trying the game out, this news soon became an urban legend in its own right, growing into an indispensable part of the original tale. But there's something many people can't stop thinking about. What did that girl see? Whatever it was bad enough for her to ignore the visions of her own funeral and her own mangled body. Whatever it was bad enough for her to try to take her own friend's life too. Some people say it was to spare her a fate worse than death. Maybe we'll never know. Or maybe, like in some versions of the story, we'll all know soon enough. Because the girl was pointing at the sky before she leapt, as if she could see something that nobody else could. That was the only story on the only page of the midnight paper. I wanted to know more. Know who wrote it, who published it, who delivered it. And I knew, like a piece of intoxicating, dangerous knowledge, that all I had to do to know more was wait for the next edition to hit the welcome mat. And I'll come back here to tell you all what it says. Gone. First midnight paper, which arrived last Friday, has somehow vanished. I put it in a drawer in my dad's study and now it's gone. Either someone broke in and stole it, or I don't know. It sounds ridiculous, but then again, this whole thing is. Maybe it disappeared on its own. After last time, I wanted to be prepared. Tonight, I set a chair by the front door and waited anxiously since 11 o'clock. Every time a car drove by, every time a leaf crunched on the asphalt outside, I rushed to the peephole. Nothing. The minutes dragged, time seemed to stretch. I've felt this feeling before, when I ordered something I really wanted online and I knew it was delivery day. This was different. Something about this paper is just wrong. If anyone else has gotten one, you'd know. It feels like looking at something you're not meant to be seeing, like it somehow slipped through the cracks, past all the rigid laws of ordinary life, and made its way to you. Holding one in your hand feels like you're touching a physical manifestation of a mistake. I imagine this is what it feels like when you touch something radioactive, as if every second that it's in your presence, it's somehow warping the very fabric of your life. Close. My heart's beating fast, the anticipation coursing through me like a drug. I stood in front of the peephole, not wanting to miss a second. I was looking at my front porch. The street outside was dark, and the front steps were illuminated only by the light above the doorway. I'd placed the welcome mat a little further away, so I could see it clearly through the peephole. And that's when it happened. The light above the doorway started to flicker slowly, then faster and faster. Suddenly it shut off completely. The entire porch was smothered in darkness, the only light coming from the streetlights outside. Somehow, the shadows around my doorstep were darker than the rest, as if swallowing every last hint of light. Then the light turned on again. Through the peephole, I could see that my front porch looked normal. The bulb above the doorway shone steadily, as if nothing had happened. I rushed, my fingers slamming against the lock, and pulled the front door open. Front porch was empty. The street was empty. 1 second passed. 2. The normal sounds of the world around me started to seep back in. I looked down at the welcome mat, and it was there. Bundle of black paper, wrapped tightly with black twine. I hesitated for a moment before grabbing it. Should I bring it inside? Should I read it out here? Should I read it at all? Then I grabbed it anyway. I had read one. That threshold had already been crossed. I took the paper into my dad's study and set it down on his desk. The knife from the kitchen was already there. All the pieces were in place. All I had to do was read it. I grabbed the knife, cut the twine, and watched the paper unfurl itself like a strange flower. Immediately, the white words jumped out at me, and I started reading. There were a few pages this time, including the front cover, but still only one story. This is what was printed on those black pages. The removal doctor. Police warn of dangerous individual. After a spate of reports of a so-called removal doctor, local police urge residents to stay away from strangers who approach them in public places and to avoid abandoned buildings of any kind. It started a few months ago. First report appeared on an online forum for reporting interactions with strange individuals, and this one certainly fit the bill. The anonymous user stated that she was walking across a public park just before closing time when a man approached her and introduced himself as the removal doctor. The woman wrote that, at the time, the man seemed professional, reliable, and had a strange persuasiveness about him. The man gave the woman a card and walked off. She has since lost it, but according to her, the card simply had an address printed on either side. The next day, the woman decided to check the address out. She inputted it into a map application and arrived, only to discover that the building had long since been abandoned. Undeterred, she found an open door and walked in. The rest is internet history. Inside the building, the woman was greeted by what looked like a state-of-the-art clinic. Floors were epoxy and spotless. The walls were painted white, and there were tarps set up to cover any broken windows. There were even fluorescent lights hanging from the ceiling. This was a far cry from the kill room the woman had imagined upon finding the abandoned location. But now, her mind was wandering more toward an underground organ trafficking ring. She was half right. The woman reports that she found the door to a clinic in the back of the building. She knocked and was welcomed inside. What was awaiting her was a consultation office straight out of a high-end hospital. There were doors to several rooms. One she could see was labeled as containing a CAT scan machine. Another was labeled as a dental office. In the center of the room was a desk, and behind that desk was the same man she had met in the public park. The woman was unable to describe him clearly in her post, only stating that the man was wearing a lab coat and that his face was hidden behind a surgical mask. The man wasted no time getting down to business. He introduced himself again as the removal doctor and explained to her that he was in the business of removing things from the human body. Anything you can think of, he said. The woman was clearly unconvinced and somewhat alarmed, but the man assured her that it was a voluntary procedure and one that had the potential to be life-saving. The doctor proceeded to ask the woman to name one thing about herself she was unhappy with. A memory, a body part, an inconvenient habit, anything. Even a tumor or a fatal condition such as cancer or a clogged artery. Online, the woman admits that she wasn't in her right mind. She was, after all, ignoring a million red flags that are staples of a dozen alleged accounts. Accounts that have transcended culture, time, and location to become old wives' tales everyone has grown up with. Like waking up in a bathtub filled with ice only to discover that your kidneys have been stolen. Luckily, this wouldn't be the case for this woman, nor has it been the case for anyone who has encountered this strange man. There was no bathtub filled with ice. At least, the woman decided against asking to have anything physical removed, perhaps fearing that there were other parties listening in who were ready to act on her words right away. She did, however, state that she wouldn't mind parting with her crippling procrastination. The doctor nodded, as if he were expecting this answer, then explained to her that this was an exchange. He would take something she didn't want about herself, but he could pick anything of hers that he wanted in return. The woman was hesitant, but ultimately agreed, allowing the man to lead her to a private examination room. The woman claims that a few hours later, she woke up in the same building, but everything around her was different. Floor was filthy concrete. The walls were covered in chipped paint, and there were no examination rooms or medical equipment of any kind. She stated that she immediately chastised herself mentally, falling for a trick a child could see through. After quickly checking herself for stitches or wounds, she was unable to find any mark on her skin. Not even a bruise, she wrote. It was only a few days later that she realized that something actually had happened in that building. She's a writer, and she was unable to start working before hours upon hours of watching YouTube videos and playing mobile games. But now she could sit and get to work immediately. It really did seem like the removal doctor had surgically removed her procrastination. She was elated, only at first. Soon she realized that something was wrong. First, it happened when she was in a video chat with her sister and her newborn. Then, it happened when her girlfriend arrived at their apartment. Finally, she confirmed her fears in front of their bathroom mirror. No matter how hard she tried, or for how long, she was unable to smile. Dozens of doctor's appointments later, the cause is still unknown. Some of them have said that it may be a mild facial paralysis caused by stress. But I know better, the woman wrote. She's convinced it was the removal doctor. I hate him, she wrote in her post. Everyone used to say I had the nicest smile. Now it's gone. But why take her smile? The woman described her last moments of consciousness. Just as the removal doctor administered an IV filled with anesthetic, she spotted a room off to one side. The door was half open and she could see a gurney with a blanket over it. It was obvious that, given the size and the shape of what was underneath it, that it was a person. But the shape was wrong. Parts were missing. He wrote, the shape was off, but it had a head and 2 legs. There were jars along the far wall, jars with all manner of body parts. There are nights, the woman wrote, where she dreams she's back in that strange clinic. Nights where she's convinced she remembers part of what happened when she was under. She spots grotesque and bizarre surgical tools through blurry eyes, hears the doctor muttering to himself, hears him say that something or someone is almost complete. Other stories about the removal doctor's patients have surfaced. One man who claimed to have asked the doctor to remove his addiction to cigarettes had his tongue removed as well. Another man who asked to have his fear of heights removed had his ability to drive taken. A man with a brain tumor asked for it to be removed, only to wake up without one of his legs. A woman asked for her depression to be removed and lost one of her eyes in the process. One of the accounts spreading the rumor even claimed that a missing person who was found without his head was one of the doctor's victims. Still, when asked what, if anything, this person may have asked to have removed, this anonymous poster couldn't say. Whatever it was, it had to be huge. Maybe something that he and a large group of people shared, like a fear or a financial condition. Speculation abounds in most of these reports, but this headless corpse shares something in common with all other alleged reports. In all cases, there were no stitches, no wounds, no scars of any kind. Whatever the doctor took, it was as if it had never existed. This fact has baffled both law enforcement and medical professionals looking into these reports. This publication would like to remind you of the police department's request. If a man approaches you with a business card and introduces himself as the removal doctor, remove yourself from the situation immediately and call 911 when at a safe distance to report your sighting. Do not, under any circumstances, go to the address on the card. Do not, under any circumstances, ask for something to be removed from your body or your personality. You will lose something in return. I put the paper down, confusion growing through my brain like a strange kind of infection. I could feel my heart beating faster again. I knew something was wrong, not just because of what was written on the pages or how the paper was delivered. A few internet searches later, and I found out I was right. There were no reports online of a removal doctor or a ledge game either. So why were the articles mentioning their presence on the internet? The media. Was the writer of these articles just making these reports up? I still don't know, but doesn't feel like it. Stories don't feel fake. They feel real, like they're happening close by. I decided to take a few photos of the paper with my phone, and soon realized that this wasn't an easy process. It was like there was something on the page that reacted badly with the camera lens. I tried taking a photo with the flash on and off, but it made no difference. The picture was ruined either way. I've linked the photo along with this new article. I hope it serves as a way to both prove my story and also to document each paper if they also go missing. You can find it here if you'd like to see it. tishiamgur.com/AV0xDTT. If what my dad said was true, I've made a grave mistake. Never read one, he told me once. I asked him why, but he wouldn't say. He just changed the subject or blurted out, "Just don't," or "because." Eventually, I thought he was just trying to scare me and forgot all about it. Now I wish I had asked him more about the midnight paper, about why I should never read it, about whether or not I should even touch it or bring it inside. All I know is that my dad said the paper arrived on Wednesdays and Fridays at our home, so there'll be another one coming Friday night. It seems like it's too soon, too overwhelming, but I'm gonna keep going, keep documenting it. And next time, I want to try to have the door open when the shadow shows up once again. After the second paper arrived on Wednesday, I decided to keep a close watch on it. I tried taking more pictures, but it seems that trying to take that first one ruined my cell phone camera. I'm looking into getting it fixed. I set the second midnight paper down on a work table and stared, watching it for any slight change. Hours passed. My eyes grew heavy. Exhaustion seemed to settle into every cell of my body, heavy as lead. It was 5 a.m. on Thursday morning when I first started to see it. There were wisps of black smoke rising from the black pages. I leaned closer, covering my nose and mouth with a face mask to avoid inhaling the smoke. It seemed like the black paper itself was burning up, but there was no fire. The pages were just beginning to curl up and float away, disintegrating into fine smoke before my very eyes. My phone rang. It was work. I ignored it. I had to keep looking. By noon, the cover page was gone. Pages beneath it were already curling up too. By 10 p.m., there was only one page left. By midnight on Thursday, it was gone. One day, paper had stuck around for 24 hours, then disintegrated. Suddenly, I was very glad to have taken that picture. Broken cell phone camera be damned. I went off to sleep and dreamt of black smoke and white ink. Friday. Another paper was coming at midnight. I wasn't ready for another one. I was exhausted, scared, but also oddly excited. This was weird. Weird in a way unlike anything I have ever experienced. It was like there was a secret, invisible world that had existed beyond my mundane life. And now that I had stumbled upon it, I didn't want to go back. I didn't get reprimanded at work, but there was some tension when I logged on Friday. Whatever. They wouldn't understand. I'd like to see how they'd react if they got a midnight paper on their doorstep. 11:50 p.m. I sat on my front porch. Front door shut behind me, the welcome mat a few feet in front of me. I'd swapped out the bulb above me for a new one, just in case. At 11:55 p.m., the hairs on my neck stood up. There seemed to be strange electricity in the air. There was a chill, too. One that felt like it went deeper than my skin, like it was wrapping around my bones. At 11:58 p.m., a metallic taste filled my mouth, like sucking on a penny. At 11:59 p.m., my eyes began to sting and water as if I was standing in front of a bonfire. Then the light bulb didn't flicker, it just shut off abruptly. I was ready. My phone was in my hand. With a few taps, I brought up the flashlight. Patch of darkness, even deeper than the one around me, peered over the welcome mat. I brought the flashlight over it and could just about see the black bundle. Then my phone went from being cold to the touch to searing hot in the blink of an eye. I dropped it, hearing glass shatter. The odd thing was, I heard it before it hit the ground. The air around me seemed to disappear. I wasn't breathing oxygen anymore. I wasn't breathing anything. My eyes bulged. My throat spasmed in protest. Then the light popped back on, and it was done. The air around me was the same as it had been just moments before. I coughed, my lungs screaming for oxygen. I swallowed it in gulps, lightheaded, the dark tentacles of a migraine already wrapping themselves around my brain like a vice. I pushed through it. I needed to see if the paper was there. I needed to know if my interference had caused it to be taken away. Sighed. It was there, the same black bundle tied with the same black twine. I brought it into my dad's study, used the knife to cut the twine, and unfurled the rolled up papers. Again, it was one article, but it was longer this time. This is what was printed on the black pages. The new kid. Jailed teacher tells bizarre tale. Former English teacher Mark Bailey, found guilty of murder last winter, sat in the visitation room of a maximum security prison. He looked gaunt, pale, haunted. He was a far cry from the young, athletic man that was a constant presence on millions of television and phone screens across the nation. Bailey seemed to have it all. He had taught at Roslyn High School for almost a decade. He was well-liked, with many students citing him as the reason they discovered a passion for literature. He was the coach of not only Roslyn High's girls' volleyball team, but also the town's Little League team. He was married to his high school sweetheart, Holly Bailey, kindergarten teacher. On the outside, his life was not just innocuous, but downright inspirational. It's a well-known fact that instead of traveling to Europe or Hawaii for their honeymoon, he and Holly opted to join the Peace Corps to volunteer in Africa. So where did it all go wrong? What transformed the Mark Bailey from 5 years ago, a well-loved coach and volunteer, into the Mark Bailey who must now be separated from the prison's general population for his own safety? The answer has a name: Stephanie Carson. Carson was a senior who attended Herrick's High School. She was popular, smart, a star player of the girls' volleyball team, and already accepted into several Ivy League schools. Stephanie's promising life was cut short when, after a few weeks of stalking so severe she placed a restraining order on him, Bailey broke into the Carson family home and attacked her with a knife. Bailey's trial was a lightning-fast affair. The evidence stacked against him so completely it left no room for interpretation. Yet, there were many online who rallied to defend him, citing his strange, disjointed testimony as evidence for mental illness. "You don't understand," said Bailey in court. "She's not what you think. You'll see. Just wait for the new school year to start. If I had more time, maybe I would have put an end to it." After being reminded that Stephanie is now deceased, Bailey exploded into a series of bizarre statements and accusations, many directed at Stephanie's parents. After several months of being blocked by Bailey's court-appointed psychologist, we were able to secure an interview with him. Sitting behind the glass in a beige jumpsuit that seemed to be several sizes too big, Bailey spoke into the phone mounted next to the window. His voice a distorted whisper. Almost immediately, as if knowing what we were there to ask about, he launched into his story. Her name was Monica First. Monica Campbell. So that's how I think of her. She was the new kid that year. She moved here from California, or so she said. She was instantly popular, pretty, from a family with a lot of money. She was at the top of every class, straight A's, 4.0 GPA. She came to the first volleyball practice, and everyone could see she would become the best player on the team. She was in my English class too, and she seemed to know more than I did. Quote Yeats on the spot. Oscar Wilde was her favorite, though. She got into Yale. Stanford too. Went for Yale for chemistry. Bright kid. She was even homecoming queen. There was something about her, like a spark. Monica was almost too bright, strangely intelligent. She seemed to be able to learn things right away and remember every little detail later. My car broke down once, right in school. There must have been a dozen teachers trying to help out. Harrison, the science teacher, was fiddling with the motor when Monica walked right up. She looked down at the engine, rolled up her sleeves like a fucking mechanic, and started working on it. She fixed it. The car started right away. She apparently spoke Japanese, German, French, Spanish. We could only verify the Spanish and the French. She spoke them fluently. A few teachers cried when she left, saying they'd miss hearing her laugh in the hall. She made a big impression. Obviously. I don't know about her parents. I think her mom came to school once or twice, dressed like she was attending the Oscars or something. But we didn't see her after that, or the father, not even at the graduation. Monica was valedictorian. It was the year after that things got weird. The first semester had just started when there was a new kid in school again. Her name was Natalie Creed. She moved here from California. She was instantly popular, pretty, from a family with a lot of money. She was at the top of every class, straight A's, 4.0 GPA. She came to the first volleyball practice, and everyone could see she would become the best player on the team. She was in my English class too, and she knew more than I did. Quote Shakespeare on the spot. Emily Dickinson was her favorite. and she looked just like Monica. Everyone asked her if she was related to her. She said no, but there were rumors. Maybe she was a cousin or a lost sibling. Her parents didn't come to school either. She was valedictorian, the homecoming queen too. She got into Harvard and NYU, went to Harvard for chemistry. It was weird. Everyone said so. They seemed to forget right away. I was the only one who kept saying how strange it was. That made them look at me. I was crazy, or worse. Why let it slide? The year after that, we were at a volleyball game at a different school. And there she was again. Her name wasn't Monica or Natalie anymore. It was Jennifer Cook. She was the best player on that team. Better by far than anyone on our. I knew something was wrong, but even asking about her made people look at me like I was sick. There are enough stories about teachers becoming obsessed with one of their students for all the wrong reason. But it wasn't like that with me. She looked the same, she acted the same, she always went off to study chemistry. So I followed her home. And the house was one of the biggest in town, and we're in Long Island. It wasn't Monica's house, but damn well could have been. Then I saw her, the mom, Monica's mom. I knew something was wrong, but when I told my wife, she told me that I was losing it. That I couldn't follow anyone home, let alone a high school student. I was a teacher, for God's sake. The year ended. When the new year started up, I went looking for her. I went to every school in the area, and I found her. Her name was now Stephanie Carson. She looked the same as Jennifer Cook, the same as Natalie Creed, the same as Monica Campbell. It wasn't just her looks, she sounded like her, moved like her, played volleyball like her. I followed her home again. It was a different house, but the same tax bracket. I waited until nightfall, then snuck in. The window was wide open. There weren't any family photos on the walls, just art. The house was fully furnished, not a fake house or anything. They must have been moving for real. Nobody was home yet, so I looked everywhere. I had to find an explanation. The door down to the basement was open, and that's where I found it. It was like a fucking lab. There were machines I couldn't even recognize, a freezer the size of the wall with frozen petri dishes and test tubes inside. There were also weird books, astronomy, cultism, demonology. Then she snuck up on me, quiet. She must have hit me with something because I blacked out. I woke up in the hospital handcuffed to a gurney. Police were there, my wife wasn't. They said that Stephanie was putting a restraining order on me, that I had been following her for weeks. They didn't seem to know I had broken in. Maybe she didn't want them to. My wife wasn't home when I got back. She didn't answer my calls either. A few weeks later, I went back to the house, around 4 a.m. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew she would be asleep. Maybe I could get her to talk somehow. I wasn't really thinking straight. I broke in again, through the same window. I went down to the basement, and it was empty. Totally empty. Just bare concrete and drag marks where things had been taken out. I was furious. She was hiding things to make me look worse. I could almost imagine her having those things taken out with a condescending smile on her face. I went up the stairs. I thought her room had to be one of the smaller ones. But when I opened it, it was all wrong. There were 2 sets of clothes in the closet. The bathroom was set up for 2 people. It was the parents' room. I checked the other small room, but it was completely empty. There was nothing on the walls, nothing on the carpeted floor, nothing in the closet. Only the master bedroom was left. But why would they give the master bedroom to their daughter? I opened the door. She was sitting up in bed, waiting for me. With a smile on her face, I asked her who she really was. I told her I knew she had been in my class, in my volleyball team, in my school. She just said one thing, and it was enough to me lose control. That wasn't me. I pulled her off the bed, dragged her down the stairs. I was going to show her the basement, you see? But it went wrong. She was faster than me, stronger than me too. She forced my fingers apart and rushed for the kitchen. Then she just waited by the knives, like she was inviting me to use one. So I pulled one out. She smiled again, so I stabbed her. Then again. Then again. She was still smiling when the police showed up. Later, they said that she had called them. that she had gotten away for a few moments and called them from the bathroom. But that was a lie. She must have called them before I went up to her room. Her parents were at the trial, and that's when I knew. They didn't look sad, just annoyed, like I had broken one of their toys. It was the parents, you see? They're behind this. I should have waited for them. I should have killed them instead. Bailey became frantic when the interview was coming to a close, like a castaway watching a ship fade into the distance. Look, it's up to you. Go to every high school in Long Island. You've got to find her. She'll be there. She's blonde, blue eyes. She must be about to graduate again. Follow her home. Get to the parents. Get them talking. You've got to find out why. Bailey was found in his cell a few days later. He'd chewed through both of his wrists. The damage was so severe that he bled out before he got to the infirmary. Nobody involved with this publication fulfilled his last request, and we urge our readers to ignore it as well. I read through the paper a couple of times. Long Island, not too far from where I live. But I'd never heard of this case. A murder like that, a trial like that, involving a teacher and a student, I'd have heard of it. By the time I was done reading, it was almost 2 a.m. I collapsed into bed and fell asleep, my mind still filled with the black pages and with that shadow that had left them on my doorstep. I spent most of Saturday in front of my computer, typing different variations of Mark Bailey and the names he had given in the article. Nothing. I was only met with seemingly thousands of Facebook profiles. No articles, no headlines, no memorial pages. Yesterday, I turned my attention toward the first 2 articles. I scoured the internet, finding only medical ads and urban legend games. No mention of the ledge game. No mention of the removal doctor. I decided to go for a walk. It was late, almost midnight actually. But I didn't have to worry about that. The next paper was due Wednesday night. I walked toward the nice part of town, where there always seemed to be new businesses and new buildings going up. The cold air felt nice on my forehead where the seeds of another migraine were already growing. Then I saw it. It was something so striking, so unmistakable that it drove the pain out of my head in an instant of blinding shock. I was looking at one of the new apartment buildings that had gone up last year. It was already well populated. I could see the checkerboard pattern of lit-up windows and dark rooms. Nothing out of the ordinary. Until you looked at the rooftop. There was a tiny silhouette standing there, at the edge of the rooftop, on the ledge. I rushed toward the building. I was maybe 1 block away. I wasn't thinking about the distance, about the difference in height, about the fact that my voice wouldn't be able to carry all the way up there. I was only thinking about that silhouette, about how it was almost exactly what I had pictured when I read my first midnight paper. The building's lobby was dark. Front desk appeared to be empty. The glass double doors were immovable. There was an e-card reader on the wall next to them. I couldn't get in. I backed up, standing in the middle of the street. Craned my neck, and there it was. The little shadow in the shape of a person standing on the ledge, quivering and shaking under the pressure of high-velocity wind. They were standing on one leg, the other was dangling over the ledge. I started to shout, but the sound died in my throat, because the person was already a blur. I closed my eyes, but I felt it anyway. Felt it more than heard it. It wasn't just a bang. It wasn't just crack. It was something you feel in your bones. Something that stabs you in the stomach and scoops all the feeling out of your legs. When I opened my eyes, I couldn't bring myself to look at the body. I just watched the red rivulets snake their way into the gutter, the ledge game. It was real. It was real now.